So let's have a demonstration on how to manage disks using disk management, how to use Windows PowerShell to manage disks, and how to use the disk part tool to manage disks and volumes. We'll start by creating a simple volume using the disk management tool. Right-click Start and choose Disk Management. Now, as you can see, there are 4 disks available to be initialized, 4 currently raw disks. I can choose at this point to initialize them all using MBR or GPT, or I can initialize them separately. Click Cancel for a moment. I'll close down Disk Management and I'm going to use Windows PowerShell to initialize those disks. Right-click Start and choose Windows PowerShell Admin. Do a get disk and I will return the list of available disks. As you can see, 4 of them are raw partition types. So now do a get disk and I'm going to pipe the output to another command where partition style equals raw. You can see it now only shows me the raw, and now I'm going to repeat that command, but this time pipe the result of that to the initialized disk commandlet. Now let's go and see what that's done. Well, I can look in PowerShell, of course, show if there are any raw disks. There are none now. And then just go back to simple get disk, and you can see that they've all been initialized as MBR. I'll leave the PowerShell window open for a moment, and I'm going to switch to disk management. And this time I'm not prompted to initialize the disk because we did that through PowerShell. So I'm going to start by creating a simple volume. If I click on this disk, go down here, disk 1, and then right click an area of unallocated space and choose new simple volume. Click through the wizard. I'm going to specify a comparatively small partition. I can assign it a drive letter, or I can choose to mount it in the following empty NTFS folder. So if I've got an existing volume formatted for NTFS, I can create a folder, I might want to call it data, and then I can mount this volume into that folder. That's a way of combining the 2 disks, if you like. I'll use a drive letter. Then I can format it for FAT32 or NTFS. I can specify an allocation unit size. It's worth mentioning that the smaller the allocation unit size, the more efficient of disk space it is, but the larger, especially when you're dealing with larger files, tends to be faster. I'm going to call this one simple, and I'm going to go for a quick format. So we've created a 5 GB NTFS partition. It's now healthy and it's mounted with drive E in the file system, as you can see. As you can see at the moment, disk 2 is blank, but I'm going to use Windows PowerShell now to create a simple volume. So let's set the disk that we want to use by using the get disk command. So that's set the focus to disk 2. I'm now going to create a new partition. It's not a random number, believe me. I'm going to pipe the output of that command to the format volume command. I don't want to be asked, so I'm going to say set confirm to false. File system will be NTFS. I'm going to assign a label of simple PS, so we knew we created it in PowerShell. And if we do a get, type correctly, get partition disk number 2, we can see that there's a volume. And if we switch back to disk management, you can also see there's an approximately 5 GB volume called simple PS that's been created. I'm now going to create a span volume, just give myself a bit more working space here. If I right click a simple partition on disk 1 and choose extend volume, I can choose to allocate space from another disk, so for example disk 2, and then click through. It's telling me here that it must convert the disk to dynamic. That's nothing to worry about. It's just a quirk of Windows 10. If you're creating simple volumes that exist on a single disk, you can configure your disk types as basic, which, as you can see down the left-hand side, is the default. As soon as you start to do spanning or mirroring type operations, then you must convert them to dynamic. It doesn't do anything to the data, and it's nothing for you to be concerned about or to worry too much about for the exam. As you can see, it's now created a volume which spans 2 disks, and you can see that its colour is indicated down here as a spanned volume. So it's used all the available free space because that's what I asked it to do. So we have a simple volume still on disk 2, and then a simple volume spanning 2 disks, disk 1 and disk 2. So I have a couple of disks still unused, disk 3 and 4. I'm now going to create a striped volume. If I right click an area of free disk space on disk 3 and choose new striped volume, it will ask me to allocate some space from disk 4. Now I don't want to use all of the available space, so I'm going to choose a smaller number. Click Next. Again, I can specify a drive letter. I suppose I could choose S for span or something, or striped rather. Click Next. Again, I specify a file system. I'm just going to go with NTFS, and we're going to call this one striped. Form a quick format. Again, it's telling me I need to convert these basic disks to dynamic. Are you okay with that? Yes, there's no problem with that at all. And again, the colour indicates the type of the volume, so we see that it's a striped volume. That would typically offer us a performance benefit because we can write across both disks. Okay, I'm going to delete a volume and reinitialize the disks so that I can use the disk part tool. Right click, choose delete volume. That returns all of the space to unallocated space and changes the disk from dynamic back to basic. So that's fine. I'm going to open up a command prompt now. And I'm going to create a disk. Let's use the disk part tool. You can see the available disks in the system. I select a disk and then list the partitions. There are none on that disk. So now I'm going to use the create partition command. It's now created a partition for us, and we can assign a drive letter, if I type it correctly. And let's go back to disk management and see what's happened. We can see here that we've got a 60 gig raw partition. Now obviously we need to format that. We can do that from the disk part tool as well. Or we can do it here through disk management if we want to format it. We'll call this one via disk part. And off it goes formatting. In the demonstration, you saw how to use disk management, Windows PowerShell and disk part to manage disks and volumes.